Only one very specific kind of person tends to remain with a narcissist for a long time, and it's rarely who people expect. Those who seem strong often break down trying to fight back. Those with firm boundaries usually walk away before anything deeply reshaping can occur. Carl Jung suggested that the unconscious makes decisions long before the conscious mind can explain them. A narcissist doesn't connect randomly. They attune themselves to a certain nervous system, a certain personal history that complements their own wounds, almost like a key fitting perfectly into a lock. But here's the detail most people overlook. The one who endures isn't the calmest or the most intellectual. It's the person who carries a quiet loneliness along with a unique ability to transform the narcissist's toxicity into something that fuels their own growth. This explains why you were chosen, not simply as a victim, but as someone pulled into a difficult transformation. The very trait that drew them toward you is also the tool that can eventually break their control. You were selected because your early experiences trained you to tolerate what others would instantly reject. A narcissist doesn't choose based on love or authentic connection. They choose based on usefulness. They are searching for a very specific function. When they scan a room or scroll through people, they are not focused on status or appearance. They are drawn to the person with the greatest capacity for emotional labor. They are drawn to you. But why you? What signal did you give that made them move closer? You revealed subtle signs of carrying unresolved wounds. More precisely, the wounds of a protector. Jung observed that the unconscious reveals itself through everyday behavior. You may think you are simply being kind, attentive, or supportive. But to a narcissist, your behavior reveals something deeper. It shows that you are conditioned to prioritize others over your own sense of reality. This conditioning often begins in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where caregivers were emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, or distant, you had to adapt. You learned that staying safe required being useful. You became skilled at reading emotional shifts. You watched facial expressions, tone, and energy, adjusting yourself to maintain stability. If someone was angry, you softened yourself. If someone was upset, you stepped in as the helper. This is known as fawning, a survival response where you override your own needs to appease the source of stress. You learned that managing someone else's emotions was the safest way to survive chaos. Picture a child noticing tension at home. One sibling withdraws, but this child moves closer, trying to lighten the mood, offering help, attempting to restore calm. At a very young age, they understand that soothing others is their path to safety. Years later, a narcissist recognizes that same pattern almost instantly. This wound often reveals itself in small, everyday moments. You might be on a first date. The server makes a minor mistake. The person you're with reacts harshly or impatiently. Someone without that background would immediately feel discomfort. They would recognize the behavior as a warning sign and possibly decide not to continue. They would see it clearly as unacceptable. But you don't interpret it that way. Instead, your mind begins creating explanations. Maybe they had a stressful day. Maybe they're particular about details. You try to smooth things over. You smile, redirect the conversation, and absorb the tension. You carry the emotional weight of their behavior. In that moment, the narcissist recognizes something important. They see that you didn't demand respect. Instead, you tried to fix the situation. They understand that you are someone who will work to earn approval, even when it isn't deserved. They see a person familiar with walking on emotional eggshells. This is why they choose you. They need someone to contain what they refuse to face. A narcissist carries deep internal shame, but avoids confronting it. They need someone else to process those emotions for them. They need a partner who will worry, who will feel deeply, who will attempt to repair what they damage. They need you to hold their unresolved parts. You were chosen because you can endure. You have an extraordinary capacity to tolerate discomfort. You can go long periods without having your needs met and still remain. You can be criticized and still try to close the gap. You can be ignored and still seek connection. To them, this doesn't look like love. It looks like a resource. What they fail to realize is that the very wound that made you accessible is also what makes you resilient. Your endurance isn't weakness. It's strength that has been misdirected. They chose you because of your vulnerability, but that same quality can become your power. There is a difficult truth within this. Your empathy, warmth, and patience, qualities that are inherently good, were turned against you. Without boundaries, even positive traits can become harmful. The narcissist didn't fall in love with your authentic self. They became attached to your survival pattern. They saw someone who would stay, no matter how harmful the situation became, because that person had learned to associate love with struggle. Recognizing this is the beginning of breaking free. It's not something to glorify. It's a sign that you've been repeating a pattern rooted in earlier experiences. You may be trying to help them in the same way you once wished you could help those who raised you. You may be trying to finally become worthy of consistent love. The narcissist depends on your lack of awareness. They want you to believe you are simply kind, but there's more beneath that. You were trained to put others first, even at your own expense, and anything learned can be unlearned. This is why a certain type of person stays longer than others, not the strongest in appearance, but the one conditioned to carry emotional weight that would overwhelm most people. If something within you shifted while reading this, if a quiet recognition surfaced, that awareness matters. It marks the beginning of change. There's also a deeper force at play, something biological, a hidden pull that makes unhealthy dynamics feel strangely familiar. You learned early on that love could come with tension, that closeness might be followed by distance, that connection could disappear without warning. So when you meet someone who creates that same pattern, intense attention followed by withdrawal, your body reacts. It recognizes the rhythm. It feels familiar. The tightness in your chest, the anticipation, the unease. These sensations are not excitement. They are signals of stress. But because you've long associated stress with connection, you move toward it instead of away from it. It often begins subtly. You've been seeing someone for a few weeks. They communicate constantly, express admiration, share parts of their world. You feel energized, uplifted, then suddenly their attention drops. Messages become short, responses are delayed. Someone with a secure sense of attachment might interpret this as disinterest or inconsistency. They would step back, but you feel something different. You feel activated. You check your phone repeatedly. You revisit conversations, searching for mistakes. You begin adjusting yourself, trying to regain the connection. Their distance triggers a deep response. You're not just reacting to them, you're responding to an old pattern. The drive to restore closeness becomes intense. You're chasing the emotional relief that comes when they return. This cycle is reinforced by something known as intermittent reinforcement. It's one of the most powerful conditioning patterns. When rewards are unpredictable, the attachment becomes stronger. Like gambling, where occasional wins keep someone engaged, the unpredictability creates dependency. The narcissist operates within this pattern. They provide moments of validation followed by absence or negativity. You hold on to the positive moments, believing they represent the truth. You convince yourself that if you just persist, that version of them will return. Jung described this as the compulsion to repeat. It's the unconscious attempt to revisit unresolved experiences in hopes of changing the outcome. You may be projecting unmet needs onto them, hoping this time the emotionally unavailable person will stay. This is why leaving feels so difficult. Your logical mind may recognize the harm, but your emotional system is deeply entangled. You're not just connected to them, you're connected to a familiar internal pattern. The stability of a healthy relationship may even feel unfamiliar or dull, simply because it lacks the emotional highs and lows you've grown used to. What feels calm might seem like a lack of connection, when in reality it's the absence of chaos. This realization is painful, but it is necessary. You have to stop labeling it as passion and begin calling it imbalance. You have to admit that the strong pull you feel is not destiny. It is a flaw in your survival wiring. You are trying to find water in stone because you were taught that stone was the only place water could ever exist. The narcissist is not your soulmate. They are a mirror reflecting your unresolved wounds. They slide perfectly into the empty spaces left from childhood, but they do not fill those spaces. They stretch them wider. The moment you accept that this sense of familiarity is actually a warning, you begin to break the illusion. You start to recognize that the anxiety inside you is your body telling you to leave, not asking you to stay. You begin to understand that you have been surviving on hope, the belief that you can rewrite your past by suffering in your present. If you have ever felt your body clinging to someone who is harming you, acknowledge that experience. That is the moment your nervous system begins to stop confusing fear with love. There comes a point when your survival instinct stops protecting the narcissist and starts protecting you. That shift changes everything. There is a common belief that a narcissist's goal is to completely destroy you. While it is true that they exhaust you, the deeper reality is different. They rely on your survival. They do not want to break you entirely, because then you would no longer serve a purpose. They want you suspended in a state where you function enough to give, but feel too empty to leave. The narcissist makes a critical error. They underestimate the very strength they rely on. They assume that because you have tolerated their behavior for so long, you will continue forever. What they fail to see is that for the type of person who endures, there is a psychological threshold. There is a moment when the survival mechanism changes direction. This is the turning point. Sometimes it arrives in the smallest, quietest way. You might be driving home after another argument and suddenly feel a deep, silent exhaustion. It settles into your bones. There are no tears, no panic, just a calm clarity rising within you. I cannot keep doing this. This shift rarely feels dramatic. It feels certain. It often doesn't happen during chaos. It happens in stillness. It might come when you are alone, or when you notice that the emotional reactions you once had are no longer there. You might look at them and feel nothing. The person who once controlled your emotions begins to appear ordinary, even small. This is part of a deeper internal process. You have tried every role. You tried to be perfect. You tried to heal them. You tried to protect them. And eventually, you realize none of it changes anything. You reach a point where the version of you that needed their approval begins to dissolve. You understand that no matter what you do, they will never truly see you. Their promises of change reveal themselves as delays, ways to keep you engaged a little longer. And in that realization, something shifts. The fear of losing them fades and is replaced by a deeper truth. I am losing myself, and that is the only loss I cannot accept. This change shows itself in moments that once would have triggered you. They begin a familiar argument. They accuse you, blame you, try to pull you into the same cycle. Before, you would have reacted. You would have defended yourself, explained, or given up your plans to keep peace. But now something is different. You hear the words, but they do not land the same way. You see the anger, but it no longer controls you. You begin to recognize the pattern behind the behavior. You see the manipulation as it happens, and because you see it, you do not participate in it. You respond simply, without emotion, without explanation. You acknowledge, but you do not engage. You continue with your plans. This is the moment you shift from being inside the experience to observing it. The narcissist depends on your emotional reactions. That is how they maintain control. When you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, you are signaling that you are no longer operating within their system. You have stepped out of the cycle. This awakening can feel like emptiness or detachment. It can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But this state is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is ending. Your mind is pulling back from a pattern that no longer serves you. Your exhaustion is not weakness. It is information. It is telling you that the old way of existing is no longer sustainable. It is forcing you to withdraw your energy from the external chaos and bring it back to yourself. You are not detached because you are broken. You are detached because you are tired of maintaining something that was never real. You are tired of trying to complete someone who refuses to change. You are tired of ignoring your own instincts again and again. When you finally say to yourself that you cannot live this way anymore, you are not giving up. You are choosing yourself. You are recognizing that the cost of staying is greater than the fear of leaving. You begin to see that you have been alone within the connection all along. And instead of this realization trapping you, it frees you. Because if you were already alone, then leaving does not take anything away from you. The person who endures the longest eventually realizes that the bond is not support. It is weight. And the same strength that kept you holding that weight is the strength that allows you to release it. This shift disrupts the narcissist in a profound way. Their entire structure depends on your emotional involvement. When you move from reacting to observing, you interrupt the foundation of their control. Their system runs on one core element, your energy. It was never truly about your love. It was about your attention, your reactions, your emotional presence. This energy, often described as narcissistic supply, is anything that confirms their sense of existence. It stabilizes their fragile identity. It can come in positive forms, like admiration and affection, or negative forms, like anger and distress. If they make you smile, they feel validated. If they make you cry or lose sleep, they feel even more powerful. Your reactions, no matter the form, feed their sense of control. But when you withdraw those reactions, everything changes. You stop explaining because you see that understanding was never their goal. You stop defending because the accusations were never real. You stop trying to fix something that was never mutual. You become neutral, calm, present without engagement. This neutrality is deeply unsettling for them. It removes their ability to regulate themselves through you. When you pull back your attention, you are removing the energy they relied on. They feel that absence immediately. And because they cannot handle that emptiness, they begin cycling through predictable behaviors to regain control. First, they may return with charm. They become attentive, kind, and familiar. They mirror the version of themselves that first drew you in. They may apologize, offer affection, or try to recreate the early connection. This is not genuine change. It is an attempt to reset the cycle. If that does not work, they shift to guilt. They position themselves as the victim. They suggest that you have changed, that you are distant, that you are abandoning them. They may create situations to trigger your empathy. If guilt fails, they turn to anger. They criticize, provoke, or insult. They try to pull you into conflict because conflict still keeps you connected. But when you remain steady, when you do not react, their usual strategies begin to fail. At that point, the conflict often expands outward. It moves beyond the private dynamic and becomes something more public. They may involve others. They introduce comparisons, new people, or outside validation. They attempt to create jealousy or insecurity. This is known as triangulation. They might mention someone who understands them better. They might highlight attention they are receiving elsewhere. The goal is to make you feel replaceable, to push you into competing for their attention. But when you are aware, you no longer compete. You see the pattern clearly. You understand that it is not about connection but control, and because you see it, it loses its power over you.